I sat in the third row at Harvard's graduation ceremony, watching my sister Ella cross the stage in her cap and gown, and that's when I noticed it. My name was missing from the family section of the program. Not just my name. Every photograph in the glossy booklet had been carefully cropped to remove me. Where I should have been standing next to my parents at family gatherings, there was just empty space. Where I'd posed with Ella at her high school graduation, she now stood alone. My father stepped up to the microphone to give a speech as a proud parent, thanking everyone who'd supported Ella through her Harvard journey. Everyone except me. My mother sat in the front row, staring straight ahead, refusing to meet my eyes. Then I overheard two relatives behind me whispering about the updated family will, and how I'd been completely removed. My heart stopped. Before I could process what was happening, my father's voice boomed through the speakers. Our family is here today to celebrate Ella's achievement. Our real family. Some people are no longer part of this. 500 guests turned to look at me. The applause that followed felt like thunder in my ears. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the wooden chair so hard my knuckles turned white. People were staring, not subtle glances, but full-on turning in their seats to look at the woman who'd just been publicly disowned at her own sister's graduation ceremony. My mind raced backward, trying to understand what I'd done to deserve this. I'm Bonnie. I'm 28 years old. I've spent my entire life trying to be good enough for my parents, Richard and Patricia. Richard was a university administrator. Patricia was a socialite who ran charity events and bragged about our family's reputation. And Ella, my baby sister, was their golden child. Growing up, I was the one who got straight A's without trying. I was valedictorian of my high school class. I earned a full scholarship to the state university because my parents said they couldn't afford to help with college. I worked 3 jobs while getting my bachelor's degree, then my master's, then started my doctoral research. I did it all on my own. Ella, on the other hand, struggled with everything academic. She needed tutors for basic math. She barely passed high school. When she talked about college, I assumed she'd go to community college or maybe a small liberal arts school. But then she got into Harvard. My parents threw a party that lasted 3 days. They bought her a new car. They paid for everything. I helped her too. When Ella called me crying about not understanding her coursework, I spent hours on the phone explaining concepts. When she needed help with papers, I edited them. When she said she was overwhelmed by graduate-level research, I walked her through my own doctoral work, showing her how real academic research was conducted. I thought I was being a good sister. Now, sitting at her graduation ceremony, watching her accept her diploma while my father smiled proudly, and my mother dabbed tears from her eyes, a horrible realization crept through my chest like ice water. After the ceremony ended, guests moved to the reception area. I stood up on shaking legs and walked toward my family. My mother saw me coming and immediately turned her back. My father put his arm around Ella and steered her away. I followed them anyway. "Mom, Dad, what's going on?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. My father didn't even look at me. "You're not welcome here, but I'm your daughter. You've made your choices," my mother said coldly. "We've made ours." Extended family members who'd known me since childhood suddenly found reasons to look elsewhere. My aunt walked right past me like I was invisible. My cousin actually stepped around me to avoid contact. They'd clearly been told to shun me, but I had no idea why. I tried to approach Ella. She stood surrounded by admirers, people congratulating her on her achievements. Someone mentioned her senior thesis, how brilliant it was, how it had won an award and been published in an academic journal. My stomach dropped through the floor. "What was your thesis about, Ella?" I asked, my voice cutting through the congratulatory chatter. She looked at me, and for just a second, I saw guilt flash across her face before she composed herself. "Neuroscience research. You wouldn't understand it. But I would understand it. I understood it perfectly. Because I'd spent 3 years of my life working on that exact research. It was my doctoral work. My original findings, my analysis, my words. I'd shown Ella my drafts last year when she called me panicking about her senior thesis. She said she didn't understand graduate-level research and asked if I could explain how proper academic work was structured. I'd sent her my research papers as examples. Just examples, I thought, to show her what good work looked like. She'd stolen it. She'd taken my 3 years of work, put her name on it, and submitted it as her own. That's why she got into Harvard's graduate program. That's why my parents were so proud. That's why they'd chosen her over me. My life's work had been stolen by my own sister, and my parents knew about it. You took my research, I said, loud enough that people around us could hear. Ella's face went pale, then red. I don't know what you're talking about. The neuroscience paper. The one about neural plasticity and learning patterns. That's mine. I wrote every word. You're delusional, my father said, stepping between us. And you're making a scene. I'm making a scene? You just disowned me in front of 500 people. Lower your voice, my mother hissed. You're embarrassing yourself. I have proof, I said. I have all my drafts with timestamps. I have the emails where Ella asked me for help. My father's expression hardened. Leave. Now. Or I'll have security remove you. I looked at my sister, hoping to see some hint of remorse, some acknowledgement of what she'd done. Instead, she smiled. Actually smiled. A small, triumphant curve of her lips that told me everything I needed to know. She'd planned this. They all had. I turned and walked out of the reception hall, my vision blurred with tears. But I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was angry, and I was going to prove what they'd done. 2 days later, I drove to my parents' estate in a wealthy suburb west of Boston. I'd spent those 2 days gathering evidence. Printed copies of my research drafts with timestamps showing I'd written them years before Ella's thesis submission. Emails where Ella had asked me to explain concepts to her. Screenshots of my original files with metadata proving they were mine. My hands shook as I rang the doorbell. I'd barely slept. I'd been surviving on coffee and rage. My mother opened the door, her face immediately closing off when she saw me. What do you want? I want to talk. All of us. Now. Your father and I have nothing to say to you. Then you can listen. I pushed past her into the house where I'd grown up. The walls were covered with family photos, but looking at them now with fresh eyes, I noticed the pattern. Dozens of pictures of Ella. A handful that included me, usually pushed to the edge of the frame. And several spots where pictures had clearly been removed, probably ones that featured me too prominently. My father appeared from his study, his face darkening when he saw me. Bonnie, you need to leave. Not until you explain this. I dropped my folder of evidence on their expensive coffee table, papers scattered across the surface. Ella came down the stairs, her expression wary. The three of them stood together, a united front against me. This is my research, I said, pointing to the documents. These are my drafts, written 3 years ago. This is the paper that Ella submitted as her senior thesis. They're identical. She plagiarized my work. My father barely glanced at the papers. He laughed. Actually laughed at me. You're jealous. This is pathetic, Bonnie. I'm not jealous. I'm telling you the truth. She stole my work and submitted it as her own. You've always been vindictive, my mother said, her voice dripping with disdain. Always trying to tear your sister down because she's more successful than you. More successful? She stole my success. You're mentally unstable, my father said. We've known this for years. This is just further proof. The accusation hit me like a slap. What are you talking about? Your obsession with achievement. Your inability to be happy for your sister. Your constant need for attention and validation. They were gaslighting me. Right to my face. They were rewriting reality. I have proof, I said again, my voice rising. The timestamps don't lie. The metadata doesn't lie. I wrote this paper. Then why didn't you publish it first? Ella asked sweetly. If it's really yours, why did I get to it before you? Because I showed it to you in confidence. Because I thought I was helping my sister. My father's expression turned threatening. If you continue making these accusations, we'll sue you for slander. I have connections, Bonnie. I can make your life very difficult. You've already made my life difficult. We can make it worse, my mother added. Much worse. We know where you work. One phone call from your father, and your career is over. The threat hung in the air. My father was dean of admissions at a prestigious private university. He had connections throughout Boston's academic community. He could absolutely destroy my professional reputation with a few well-placed calls. But I was too angry to be scared. Fine. Threaten me. But I still want answers about my college fund. The room went very quiet. What college fund? My father asked, but his voice had changed. Now he sounded defensive. The one Grandma and Grandpa set up for me. $75,000 they left specifically for my education. You told me it never existed, that I misunderstood. But I've been going through old documents, and I found the paperwork. My mother's face went white. Where's my money? I demanded. My father's jaw clenched. That money was redistributed to where it was needed most. Redistributed? The word felt like acid in my mouth. You mean you stole it? We did not steal anything. We made a family decision about family resources. It wasn't a family decision. It was my money. My grandparents left it for me. Ella needed it more, my mother said simply. Harvard is expensive. The casual way she admitted it made my head spin. So you just took it? Without asking me? You were 19. You didn't need to be involved in financial decisions. It was my money, and we used it to give your sister opportunities, my father said. Something you should be happy about, if you actually cared about this family. I stared at them, realizing the depth of their betrayal was far worse than I'd imagined. Did you forge my signature? You would have needed my signature to access that account. The silence that followed was answer enough. You committed fraud, I said slowly. You stole from me and forged documents to do it. You can't prove anything, my father said. I can try. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Let me be very clear, Bonnie. If you pursue this, we will destroy you. We'll tell everyone you're mentally ill. We'll ruin your reputation. We'll make sure you never work in research again. We have the resources and the connections to bury you. Why? The word came out as a sob. Why are you doing this to me? I'm your daughter. You've always been difficult, my mother said. Always questioning things. Always causing problems. Ella is the daughter we wanted, the daughter we're proud of. And we're done pretending otherwise. The words cut deeper than anything else they'd said. This wasn't about the money or the research. This was about them simply not wanting me. Get out, my father said. And if you come back, I'll file for a restraining order. I want to see the financial records. I want proof of where my money went. My father's face turned red. You want proof? Fine. We took your $75,000 and paid for Ella's first year at Harvard. We also took out credit cards in your name when you were 19 to help with expenses. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. What? You had good credit because you were young and hadn't done anything yet. We needed the money. You took out credit cards in my name? Without telling me? We made minimum payments. It's not like we ruined anything, but they had ruined something. Everything suddenly made sense. Why I'd struggled so much financially through college. Why I could never seem to get ahead, no matter how hard I worked. Why my credit score had been mysteriously low when I tried to rent my first apartment. I'd thought I was bad with money. I'd felt ashamed, like I was failing at basic adulting. But it wasn't me. It was them. They deliberately sabotaged my financial life to elevate my sister. You destroyed my credit, I whispered. I couldn't get loans. I couldn't qualify for better apartments. I had to work 3 jobs just to survive. And it was because of you. Oh, stop being dramatic, my mother said. It built character. I looked at my sister, who'd been silent through most of this exchange. Did you know? She shrugged. I knew they helped with my tuition. I didn't ask where the money came from. You knew it was mine. I knew you were being selfish about it, she said. Family is supposed to help each other. The hypocrisy made me want to scream. I did help you. I helped you with everything, and you stole from me. We're done with this conversation, my father said. He walked to the front door and opened it. Leave now, Bonnie, and don't come back. If you show up here again, I'll call the police and file for that restraining order. If you contact Ella, I'll do the same. If you continue making accusations about our family, I'll sue you into bankruptcy. Are we clear? I looked at the three of them standing there, united against me. My own family, treating me like an enemy. Crystal clear, I said. I walked out of that house, knowing I'd never be welcome there again. But I also walked out knowing exactly what I needed to do next. I was going to prove what they'd done. I was going to expose them, and I was going to get justice, no matter what it cost me. The next week blurred together in a haze of obsessive investigation. I couldn't sleep. I barely ate. Every waking moment was spent digging into my parents' lives, looking for proof of what they'd done to me. I started with my father's position at the university. Richard was dean of admissions at one of Boston's most prestigious private universities. I began researching admission patterns, looking at which students had gotten in over the past several years. What I found made my blood run cold. Students with mediocre test scores and average grades were being admitted, while students with perfect records were being rejected. At first, I thought maybe there was some explanation, some diversity initiative or special circumstances I wasn't seeing. But then I started cross-referencing the admitted students with their families' financial backgrounds. Every single questionable admission belonged to a student from an extremely wealthy family. And every single one of those families had made substantial donations to the university shortly before or after their child's admission. I created a spreadsheet. 8 years of data. Patterns emerged with statistical impossibility. The children of donors were admitted at a rate of 97%, regardless of qualifications. Regular students, even with perfect credentials, had only a 40% admission rate. My father was running an admissions fraud scheme. I dug deeper into my mother's charity foundation. Patricia had always been so proud of her philanthropic work, hosting galas and fundraisers for various causes. But as I traced the money flowing through her foundation, I found shell companies and LLCs that didn't quite make sense. Money would come in as donations, then disappear into these companies, then reappear as payments to my parents for vague consulting fees. Hundreds of thousands of dollars moving through a complicated web designed to hide what was really happening. They were laundering money. I spent hours going through old files on the family computer. I still had the password from years ago when we all shared it, and apparently no one had thought to change it. In my father's email archives, I found communications with wealthy families discussing their children's applications. The language was carefully coded, but the meaning was clear. Donate this amount, and your child gets in. My mother's emails showed her coordinating the financial side of things, moving money through her foundation to make it look legitimate. And then I found Ella's involvement. My sister had been complicit in this scheme for at least 2 years. She'd used her social connections, her sorority network, her wealthy friends, to recruit more families into the fraud. She'd introduced parents who were worried about their children's college prospects to our father. She'd facilitate meetings. She'd even received kickback payments into her own account. My entire family was running a criminal enterprise. But the worst discovery came when I dug into my own stolen research. I started looking at papers I'd written in high school, projects I'd done for competitions, essays I'd submitted for scholarships. I searched for them online. I found them, published under Ella's name. A science fair project I'd done in 10th grade about cellular regeneration. Ella had submitted it in 8th grade and won regional awards. A history paper I'd written about women's suffrage. That had become Ella's winning essay for a national scholarship. Even my college application essays, the personal statements I'd agonized over, had been recycled for Ella's applications. They'd been stealing my work for over a decade. Every achievement that made Ella look impressive, every award that got her into better schools, every accomplishment that made my parents proud. It was built on my stolen intellectual property. They'd systematically taken everything I created and used it to build a fake resume for my sister. I wasn't just scapegoated. I was harvested. But then I found something that made me physically ill. I wasn't the only victim. Buried in my father's files were folders labeled with other students' names. I opened them and found the same pattern. Stolen essays, plagiarized research, work that had been submitted by my father's tutoring company under different students' names. My parents had run a tutoring service on the side for wealthy families. They'd charged premium rates to help struggling students. But instead of actually tutoring them, they'd stolen work from their more talented students, modified it slightly, and sold it to the rich kids. At least 12 families had been victimized. 12 other students whose work had been stolen and repurposed. Some of the victims were students my father had access to through his university position. Others were people who'd hired the tutoring company, not knowing it was a front for academic fraud. I printed everything. I compiled it into organized folders. I had bank records showing money flowing through shell companies. I had emails discussing the admissions scheme. I had proof of the plagiarism. I had evidence of identity theft. I had enough to bring down my entire family. The evidence was overwhelming. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was a pattern of criminal behavior spanning years. This was fraud on a massive scale. I sat in my tiny apartment surrounded by boxes of printed documents. And for the first time since the graduation ceremony, I felt something other than despair. I felt power. I was going to take this to the authorities. I was going to report them to the university's ethics board. I was going to go to the police. I was going to contact the FBI because this crossed state lines and involved wire fraud. And I was going to make sure every single person they'd victimized knew the truth. My family had spent years building their reputation on lies and stolen work. Now I was going to be the one who tore it all down. I picked up my phone and started making calls. The first 48 hours after I reported my family felt like vindication was finally coming. I'd contacted the university's ethics board with my compiled evidence. They'd assigned an investigator and scheduled interviews. I'd filed a police report about the identity theft and credit card fraud. The officer taking my report had seemed genuinely concerned and promised to forward it to the Financial Crimes Unit. I'd even reached out to a reporter at the Boston Globe who'd written about education fraud before. She'd listened to my story and asked me to send over documentation. For 2 days, I let myself hope that justice was real, that the system worked, that truth mattered more than power and money. I should have known better. On the third day, everything fell apart. The University Ethics Board called to inform me they were dismissing my complaint. The woman on the phone sounded uncomfortable as she explained that after reviewing my report, they determined it was a personal family dispute outside their jurisdiction. When I tried to argue, she cut me off and said the decision was final. The police called next. The officer who'd taken my report said they were closing the case due to insufficient evidence. When I pointed out that I'd provided bank records and forged documents, he told me those matters were too old to prosecute and suggested I pursue civil court instead. His tone made it clear he'd been told to drop it. The reporter stopped returning my emails and calls. Just silence. I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone, trying to understand how everything had been shut down so quickly. Then my lawyer called. I'd hired a cheap attorney to help me navigate the restraining order my father had threatened. He had bad news. My parents had already filed for a restraining order against me. The petition claimed I was harassing them, stalking them, and making false accusations. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out, and the judge had granted a temporary order. I couldn't go within 500 feet of my parents, my sister, their home, or their places of employment. How did this happen? I asked. I reported them. They're the criminals. Your father has connections, my attorney said. He's friends with the police chief. Your mother serves on charity boards with several judges' wives. They've been building relationships in this community for decades. So they just get away with it? I'm sorry, Bonnie, Sometimes that's how it works. But it got worse. 2 days later, I was called into a meeting with HR at the research firm where I worked. My supervisor looked uncomfortable as she explained that they'd received several complaints about my conduct. Anonymous complaints alleging that I was emotionally unstable, that I'd been making threats, that I was creating a hostile work environment. "These are lies," I said. "My parents are doing this. They're trying to destroy my career. We have to take these complaints seriously. I'm placing you on administrative leave pending an investigation." "How long?" 2 weeks initially, possibly longer. I was being forced out of my job. The anonymous complaints were obviously coming from my parents' network, people they'd called in favors from. They were systematically destroying every aspect of my life. Without my income, I couldn't pay rent. I'd already spent most of my savings on the lawyer. The identity theft my parents had committed years ago had destroyed my credit, so I couldn't get a loan. I had no safety net. Within a week, I received an eviction notice. 30 days to vacate my apartment. My extended family had completely cut me off. Cousins who I'd grown up with wouldn't return my calls. My aunt sent me a text saying she couldn't be involved in family drama and to please not contact her again. Everyone had chosen sides, and they'd all chosen my parents. The few friends I had started distancing themselves too. My parents had been spreading rumors throughout their social circles. People were hearing that I was mentally unstable, that I'd had a breakdown, that I was making wild accusations against my innocent family. The whisper campaign was effective. I felt completely isolated. The restraining order hearing loomed over everything. My attorney warned me that it wasn't looking good. The judge assigned to the case was someone my father knew socially. My parents had hired an expensive legal team, while I was stuck with a overworked public defender type who'd taken my case cheap because I was broke. "They're going to present you as an unstable person who's harassing them," my lawyer explained. "They have fake evidence, manipulated emails, falsified documents. Your mother got a psychologist she knows to write a statement saying you have a history of mental health issues. But I've never even seen that psychologist." "I know, but she's respected in the community, and your mother is on the board of the mental health clinic where she works. It's all connected, Bonnie. These people protect each other." I lost my job officially after the 2-week investigation. They cited the anonymous complaints and said they couldn't have someone on staff who was involved in an ongoing legal dispute. The fact that I was the victim didn't seem to matter. I moved into a cheap extended stay motel on the outskirts of Boston. It was all I could afford. The room smelled like mildew and cigarette smoke. The walls were thin enough that I could hear every argument and every couple fighting in the rooms around me. I lived on credit cards, watching my debt climb higher every day. The same credit cards my parents had destroyed years ago were now my only lifeline, and I knew I was drowning. 3 days before the restraining order hearing, I sat on the scratchy motel bedspread surrounded by boxes of evidence that no one would look at, and I seriously considered giving up. Maybe I should just leave Boston. Start over somewhere else. Change my name. Disappear. I looked at all the work I'd done, all the proof I'd gathered, and realized it didn't matter. My parents had money and power and connections. I had the truth, but truth wasn't enough when you were fighting the system alone. I thought about just accepting the permanent restraining order, just letting them win, just walking away, and trying to salvage whatever life I could build somewhere else. The lawyer had basically told me that's what I should do. "You can't win against people like that," he'd said. "Sometimes you have to know when to quit." I sat there in that horrible motel room, looking at my reflection in the mirror. I'd lost 15 pounds. I hadn't slept properly in weeks. I had dark circles under my eyes. I looked like I was falling apart. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was unstable. No. I stopped that thought immediately. That was their voice in my head. That was the gaslighting, working exactly how they wanted it to. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't unstable. I was a victim fighting back against abusers who had all the advantages. But I was losing. The hearing was in 3 days, and I had no strategy, no new evidence, no way to fight back against their expensive lawyers, and their powerful friends. I lay down on the motel bed and closed my eyes, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. That's when someone knocked on my door. I almost didn't answer. It was 9 o'clock at night. I was in a cheap motel in a rough part of town, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Nobody even knew where I was staying. The knock came again, more insistent. I looked through the peephole and saw a woman I didn't recognize. She was in her 40s, professionally dressed, holding a leather briefcase. She didn't look like she belonged in this neighborhood. "Who is it?" I called through the door. "My name is Diana Grant. I'm a journalist with the Boston Globe. I need to talk to you about your family." My heart started pounding. I opened the door but kept the chain on. The Globe already ignored my story. That wasn't me. "Can I come in? This is important." Something in her voice made me trust her. I unhooked the chain and let her inside. Diana looked around the dingy motel room, taking in the boxes of documents, the unmade bed, my obvious state of distress. Her expression softened. "How long have you been living here?" 2 weeks. "Who are you really?" She set her briefcase down and pulled out credentials. "I'm an investigative journalist. I've been working on a story about your father and the university for 6 months." I stared at her. "What?" "I started investigating admissions fraud after my nephew was rejected from your father's university, despite having perfect grades and test scores. A student with mediocre qualifications got in instead. The other kid's family had donated $50,000 to the school the week before. I smelled something wrong and started digging. Hope flared in my chest for the first time in weeks. "You've been investigating them?" "I've found a pattern of corruption going back 7 years. At least 12 families paid bribes disguised as donations. I have bank records showing money moving through your mother's charity foundation. I have testimony from 2 other students whose work was plagiarized by your father's tutoring company." I sat down heavily on the bed. "Why didn't you respond when I reached out?" "That was Tim Wilson, our education reporter. He's a good guy, but he got scared off. Your father threatened to sue the newspaper for libel if we published anything. Tim's editor killed the story." "So why are you here?" "Because I don't answer to Tim's editor. I work in investigative, and I've been building this case carefully. When I heard about you filing complaints and those complaints getting shut down, I knew I needed to find you. You're the insider witness I've been looking for." Diana opened her briefcase and pulled out folders. "I have evidence of the admissions scheme, but I need your specific testimony about your father's role. I need your personal story about the stolen research. I need someone willing to go on record." "My parents have destroyed my life," I said. "I've lost everything. They have a restraining order hearing in 3 days, and I'm going to lose that too. What's the point?" "The point is that we can take them down properly. I have contacts at the federal level, the FBI, the Department of Education. Admissions fraud is a federal crime. We can bypass the local system, where your family has all the connections. You really think we can stop them?" "I know we can, but I need your help. I need your evidence and your testimony." I showed her everything I'd compiled. We spent 2 hours going through documents while I explained what each piece proved. Diana took notes, asked questions, photographed key documents. "This is even bigger than I thought," she said finally. "The scope of the fraud, the number of victims, the amount of money involved. This isn't just a local scandal. This is national news. How do we make sure they actually face consequences?" "We build an airtight federal case. I have a source at the FBI who specializes in fraud. We present everything to them first. Let them open an official investigation. Then I publish my story when they're ready to make arrests. That way your parents can't use their local connections to shut it down." "What about the restraining order hearing?" Diana's expression turned serious. "You're probably going to lose that. I'm sorry, but that's the reality. The judge is in their social circle, and they've already poisoned the well. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter. Let them think they've won. Let them get overconfident. While they're celebrating their victory, we'll be building the case that brings them down. How long will that take? If we move fast? 2 to 3 weeks. We file everything with the FBI. They open their investigation. Department of Education gets involved because federal funding is at stake. Multiple agencies coordinate. And then I publish the story that exposes everything. And you really think this will work? I've been doing this for 20 years, Diana said. I've taken down corrupt politicians, dirty cops, fraudulent businesses. Your parents are criminals who got away with it for too long because they had local power, but they don't have federal power. And they're about to learn that truth always catches up. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than despair. I felt hope. There's something else, Diana said. I found another victim, a professor at the university named Harold Burton. He's worked there for 20 years and witnessed your father's corruption firsthand. He's kept records of everything because he knew someday someone would investigate. He wants to testify. Why hasn't he come forward before? Same reason nobody else has. Fear. Your father has the power to destroy careers, but Harold's retiring next month, and he wants to clear his conscience. He has recorded conversations with your father discussing specific bribes. That's the smoking gun we need. Diana started packing up her materials. Here's what happens next. Tomorrow, you and I meet with my FBI contact. We hand over everything. They open a formal investigation. Professor Burton provides his testimony and recordings. We identify other victims and get them to cooperate. We build a case so strong that no amount of local connections can stop it. What do I do about the hearing? Show up. Be respectful. Don't fight it too hard. Let the judge grant the permanent restraining order. Your parents need to think they've neutralized you. They need to feel safe and victorious. Because that's when they'll get sloppy. This is really happening? I asked. We're really going to stop them? We're going to do more than stop them, Diana said. We're going to expose them, prosecute them, and make sure everyone knows what they did. Your family has been destroying lives for years. It's time someone destroyed theirs. After Diana left, I sat in that motel room feeling like I could breathe for the first time in weeks. I wasn't alone anymore. I had an ally with resources and connections. I had a real plan. The restraining order hearing didn't matter. My temporary losses didn't matter. Because in 3 weeks, my family's entire world was going to collapse, and I was going to be the one who made it happen. The restraining order hearing went exactly as predicted. I sat in the courtroom while my parents' expensive lawyer painted me as an unstable, jealous sister who couldn't accept her siblings' success. They presented manipulated emails and fake evidence. They had their psychologist friend testify about my supposed mental health issues despite never having met me. My cheap lawyer tried his best, but we were outmatched. The judge, who belonged to the same country club as my father, granted the permanent restraining order. I was forbidden from coming within 500 feet of my parents, my sister, or their places of employment. Any violation would result in arrest. My parents looked triumphant as they left the courthouse. My father made a statement to the local press about how painful it was to have a troubled daughter, but how they had to protect themselves. My mother dabbed fake tears from her eyes. Ella stood between them looking vindicated. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what was coming. While they celebrated their legal victory, Diana and I had been working nonstop. We'd met with FBI agents who specialized in wire fraud and racketeering. We'd provided boxes of evidence. We'd walked them through the entire scheme, explaining how the admissions fraud worked, how the money was laundered through my mother's charity, how the plagiarism operation functioned. Professor Harold Burton had been incredible. He'd worked at the university for 23 years and had watched my father corrupt the admissions process from the inside. He'd kept detailed records of suspicious admissions, noting patterns and documenting concerns. But what made him invaluable were the recordings. Harold had started secretly recording conversations with my father 2 years ago, when the corruption became impossible to ignore. He had audio of my father explicitly discussing bribes with wealthy parents. He had recordings of my father instructing staff to change admission decisions after donations came through. He had evidence that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. The FBI had opened an official investigation. So had the Department of Education. because federal student aid money was involved. The IRS joined in because of the tax fraud through my mother's fake charity. Multiple agencies were now coordinating. We'd tracked down 8 of the 12 families whose children's work had been stolen by my parents' tutoring company. 5 agreed to provide testimony. 2 others were considering it. The victims' testimonies painted a clear pattern of systematic fraud. Diana had been writing her investigative article, but holding it until the FBI gave clearance. The plan was to publish the story the same day arrests were made, ensuring maximum impact and preventing my parents from spinning the narrative. Everything was falling into place. 3 weeks after the restraining order hearing, my father was promoted to vice president of the university. There was a big announcement, press releases about his years of service and dedication to education. My mother received a humanitarian award from a local charity organization for her philanthropic work. Ella had been accepted into a prestigious graduate program at another Ivy League school, riding on the reputation of her stolen thesis. My family was at the absolute peak of their power and social standing, which made it the perfect time to destroy them. The university was planning a gala to honor my father's promotion and 30-year career. It was going to be a massive event, 500 guests, held at a historic venue in downtown Boston. All the important people would be there. University officials, local politicians, wealthy donors, prominent community members, media coverage. Diana secured press credentials to cover the event. I bought a ticket under a fake name, using a friend's credit card. The restraining order didn't apply to public events, and nobody would recognize me anyway. I'd lost more weight, changed my hair, and honestly looked like a different person than I had at Ella's graduation. The night of the gala arrived. I put on the nicest dress I owned and took a taxi to the venue. My hands shook the entire drive. Diana had assured me the FBI was ready to move. Everything was coordinated, but I was still terrified. The ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers, elegant decorations, tables full of Boston's elite drinking expensive wine and congratulating my father on his achievements. I slipped in quietly and found a seat near the back. My father stood at the podium in his tuxedo, looking distinguished and respectable. My mother sat at the head table in an expensive gown, smiling graciously at well-wishers. Ella circulated through the crowd, networking with influential people who thought she was a brilliant young academic. They looked untouchable. My father began his acceptance speech, talking about integrity and values and dedication to education. The hypocrisy made me physically ill. He thanked the university for trusting him with shaping young minds. He talked about the importance of fairness in admissions. I waited. Diana was somewhere in the crowd with her photographer. FBI agents were outside, waiting for the signal. Everything hinged on perfect timing. My father continued speaking about family values and how his wife and daughter inspired him to be better. The audience smiled and nodded approvingly. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up. 500 heads turned to look at me. "I have a question," I said loudly, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. My father's face went pale when he recognized me. "Security. I want to ask about your admissions process," I continued, talking fast before they could remove me. "Specifically, I'm curious about the correlation between large donations and acceptance rates." Security guards started moving toward me, but Diana stood up on the other side of the room. "Diana Grant, Boston Globe," she called out. "I'd like to hear the answer to that question too. Specifically regarding the Johnson family donation of $75,000 and their son's admission, despite a 2.1 GPA?" The room erupted in confused murmuring. My father tried to regain control. "This is not the time or place for." "What about the Martinez family?" Diana continued, pulling out her notes. $50,000 donated. Daughter admitted despite failing SAT scores? Or the Chen family? I added. Wait, I can't use Chen. Or the Wilson family? $100,000? Son admitted despite being rejected by every other school he applied to? My father's face turned red. These accusations are slanderous. Security. Remove these women immediately. But Diana held up her phone. I have bank records. I have emails. I have recordings of you discussing bribes with parents. Would you like me to play them?" The university president stood up, looking blindsided. "Richard, what is she talking about? It's lies. This is my disturbed daughter trying to ruin my reputation." "I'm not disturbed," I said calmly. "I'm telling the truth. And I'm not the only victim." Diana started calling out names. Families who'd paid bribes, students whose work had been stolen, dates and amounts and specific details. The crowd was in chaos now, people pulling out their phones, reporters recording everything. "I also have questions about Patricia's charity foundation," Diana continued, turning to my mother. "Specifically about the shell companies and LLCs used to launder money. Would you like to explain those?" My mother's face had gone white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Really? Because the IRS seems very interested in your tax returns for the past 7 years. That's when the FBI agents walked in. 3 men in suits, badges displayed, moving purposefully through the crowd. The lead agent approached the head table. "Richard Patterson, Patricia Patterson, you're both under investigation for wire fraud, racketeering, and money laundering. We need you to come with us for questioning." The ballroom exploded. Cameras flashing, people shouting questions, my parents looking around desperately for escape routes that didn't exist. My father tried one last defense. "This is harassment. My daughter has a restraining order. She's not allowed near me." "The restraining order doesn't apply to federal investigations," the FBI agent said, "and Miss Patterson has been cooperating with our investigation as a witness. Now, are you coming voluntarily, or do we need to make this more official?" I looked at Ella, who'd been frozen near the champagne table. "Your turn," I said. Diana approached her with a smile. "Ella Patterson? I have some questions about your senior thesis. The one that won all those awards? I have the original research files from your sister's computer, with timestamps and metadata. Would you like to explain how you submitted work 3 years before it was written?" Ella's face crumpled. She started crying, but unlike at past family events, nobody rushed to comfort her. Instead, university officials were staring at her with horror, realizing the implications. "My thesis advisor would like to speak with you," a dean said coldly, "along with Harvard's Academic Integrity Board." Everything was unraveling in real time. My father being questioned by FBI agents, my mother frantically calling lawyers, Ella sobbing as her academic career disintegrated, university officials scrambling to manage the public relations disaster, donors demanding explanations, media capturing every second. The perfect family that had tried to erase me was being erased themselves, in front of 500 witnesses. I caught my father's eye across the chaos. For just a moment, we looked at each other. He'd spent my entire life making me feel worthless, stealing from me, gaslighting me into thinking I was the problem. Now he knew the truth. I hadn't been the problem. He had. Diana appeared at my side. "Come on, let's get out of here. My article publishes in 3 hours, and I want you somewhere safe when it goes live." We walked out of the gala while chaos erupted behind us. Camera flashes lit up the night. Reporters shouted questions. But I kept walking, head high, finally free. The family that tried to destroy me had destroyed themselves instead, and I'd gotten to watch it happen. The aftermath of that night spread like wildfire through Boston, and then nationally. Diana's article published at midnight, and by morning it was trending on social media. Major news outlets picked up the story. The scandal had everything: wealthy corruption, academic fraud, family betrayal, and dramatic public exposure. The legal consequences came swiftly. My father was arrested 3 days after the gala and charged with multiple federal crimes, including wire fraud, mail fraud, honest services fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. The prosecutors were seeking 15 to 20 years in prison. He was released on $2 million bail with an ankle monitor, his passport confiscated, and his assets frozen. My mother was charged as an accomplice and co-conspirator. The IRS filed additional charges for tax evasion and fraud, through her fake charity foundation. She was facing up to 10 years in federal prison. Her bail was set at $1 million. The family's mansion, the one I'd grown up in, was seized as part of the asset forfeiture. Everything they'd bought with stolen money was being taken back. Ella's academic life imploded completely. Harvard officially revoked her degree after a thorough investigation confirmed she'd plagiarized my research for her senior thesis. The academic journal that published the paper issued a formal retraction. Every award she'd received was rescinded. The graduate program that had accepted her withdrew their offer. Her name was now permanently associated with fraud and plagiarism in academic circles. She was also facing criminal charges for identity theft, since she'd knowingly submitted stolen work as her own. Her lawyers were negotiating a plea deal, but she'd likely serve at least 2 years on probation and possibly some jail time. The university launched an internal investigation that expanded far beyond my father. The president resigned. 3 board members stepped down. The dean of students was fired. The entire admissions department was restructured under federal oversight. The Department of Education imposed strict monitoring requirements and threatened to revoke the school's access to federal student aid funding if reforms weren't implemented immediately. 19 families were identified as having paid bribes for admissions. Their children's degrees were under review. Several had already been expelled. The families themselves faced potential charges for fraud and conspiracy. The victims of my parents' plagiarism operation came forward one by one. What started with the 5 families Diana had found grew to 12, then 18. A class action lawsuit was filed seeking damages for theft of intellectual property, emotional distress, and loss of educational opportunities. I was part of that lawsuit too. My lawyers filed civil claims against my parents for the stolen college fund, the identity theft, the credit card fraud, the plagiarized research, and years of financial manipulation. With their assets frozen and their crimes proven, the settlement negotiations were straightforward. I recovered my original $75,000 college fund plus interest. I received additional compensation for the damaged credit and financial hardship their fraud had caused. I got restitution for my stolen intellectual property. The total settlement was over $300,000. For the first time in my adult life, I was financially stable. But money wasn't the real victory. The real victory was watching the truth emerge and be validated. Academic journals issued formal corrections, crediting me as the author of the research that had won awards under Ella's name. Universities that had previously rejected me now reached out with apologies and opportunities. My professional reputation was restored and enhanced because people saw me as someone who'd stood up against corruption, despite enormous personal cost. I received job offers from research institutions across the country. After everything that had happened in Boston, I decided to leave. I accepted a position at a research institute in California, a fresh start, a place where nobody knew my family's history, where I could just be Bonnie the researcher, not Bonnie the victim or Bonnie the whistleblower. The emotional healing took longer than the legal resolution. I started therapy to process everything. My therapist helped me understand that I'd grown up in a narcissistic family system where I was designated as the scapegoat. Everything that went wrong was blamed on me. Everything I achieved was minimized or stolen. My role in the family was to be the bad one, so that Ella could be the good one. Understanding that pattern helped me stop blaming myself. For years, I'd internalized their messages. I'd thought there was something fundamentally wrong with me that made my own parents not love me. But the therapist explained that the problem was never me. It was them. They were abusers who used me for their own purposes, and when I was no longer useful, they tried to discard me. Recognizing that truth was both painful and liberating. My parents tried to contact me several times during their legal proceedings. My father sent letters from house arrest, trying to justify his actions. He claimed he'd done everything for the family, that I was being ungrateful, that I was destroying them over minor mistakes. The letters read like a masterclass in manipulation and gaslighting. I didn't respond. My mother showed up at the motel where I'd been staying, wanting to talk. The owner called me before letting her in, and I told him I didn't want to see her. She left a note under my door about how she was sorry I felt hurt, but that I was tearing the family apart. Not that she was sorry for what she'd done, just sorry that I felt hurt. Classic non-apology. Ella sent me long, tearful messages trying to explain herself. She said she'd been pressured by her parents. She claimed she didn't know the research was really mine. She begged me to tell the prosecutors she was innocent. Every word was a lie, and we both knew it. I blocked all of them. I got a new phone number. I cut off every avenue of contact. Some people told me I should forgive them because they're family. But I'd learned that family isn't defined by blood. Family is the people who love you, support you, and treat you with respect. By that definition, the Pattersons were never my family. 1 year after the gala, I attended my father's sentencing hearing. The judge had reviewed all the evidence, heard testimony from victims, and considered the scope of the crimes. My father gave a statement claiming he was sorry and had made mistakes but was fundamentally a good person who deserved leniency. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison. My mother's sentencing came 2 weeks later. She received 6 years. Ella's plea deal resulted in 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and a permanent mark on her record that would follow her forever. No university would accept her now. No legitimate employer would hire her for anything requiring trust or integrity. She'd have to rebuild her entire life from scratch, just like I'd had to, except she deserved it. Standing in that courtroom watching them be sentenced, I felt something unexpected. I felt free. For my entire life, I'd carried the weight of their disapproval, their manipulation, their abuse. I'd tried so hard to earn their love, to be good enough, to make them proud. I'd sacrificed my own well-being trying to help Ella, trying to please my parents, trying to be the daughter they wanted. And it was never going to be enough because the problem was never me. Watching them face consequences for their actions, I finally let go of the burden I'd been carrying. Their choices were their responsibility. Their crimes were their fault. Their destroyed lives were the natural consequences of their corruption. I didn't cause this. They did. And I was finally, completely free of them. Moving to California felt like being reborn. I found an apartment with big windows and natural light. I decorated it exactly how I wanted. I adopted a dog from a shelter. I started going to yoga classes and joining social groups. I made friends who knew me for who I was, not as part of some dysfunctional family dynamic. I threw myself into my research, the work I genuinely loved. Without the constant stress of family drama, my creativity flourished. I made breakthrough discoveries. I published papers under my own name that received recognition in my field. I was building a career based on my actual abilities, not stolen work or family connections. I even started dating someone, a kind, genuine person who valued honesty and integrity. Someone who, when I told them my story, was horrified by what my family had done and supportive of my healing process. Someone who saw me clearly and loved what they saw. My new life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. 18 months after leaving Boston, I received an award for my research from a professional organization in my field. It was a legitimate honor based on peer-reviewed work and genuine achievement. I flew back east for the ceremony. Standing on that stage accepting the award, I thought about that day at Ella's Harvard graduation, when I'd been erased from the program and disowned in front of 500 people. I thought about how small and worthless they'd made me feel. How powerless I'd been. But I wasn't powerless anymore. I'd stood up to corruption. I'd exposed criminals. I'd helped other victims get justice. And I'd rebuilt my entire life into something honest and real. The audience applauded, and I looked out at hundreds of colleagues and peers who respected my work and recognized my contributions. This time, I wasn't erased. I was celebrated, on my own merit. For my own achievements, I'd won. Not by destroying my family, although that had happened. I'd won by refusing to let them destroy me. In my acceptance speech, I talked about integrity in research and the importance of authentic work. I didn't mention my family specifically, but anyone who'd followed the news knew what I was referring to. The truth is patient, I said. It waits. And eventually, no matter how much money or power tries to bury it, the truth comes out. Sometimes the cost of speaking truth is high, but the cost of staying silent is higher. Living with integrity means sometimes you lose everything in the short term, but what you gain in the long term, your self-respect, your freedom, your peace, that's worth more than any inheritance or family approval could ever be. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, several young researchers approached me. They thanked me for speaking up. Some shared their own stories of facing corruption or abuse. Others said I'd inspired them to value their own work and not let anyone take credit for their achievements. I realized my story had become bigger than just me. It had become a symbol for everyone who'd been scapegoated, stolen from, or told they were worthless by the people who should have protected them. And that gave my suffering meaning. I couldn't change what my family had done to me, but I could use my experience to help others. I could be the person I'd needed when I was sitting in that motel room feeling hopeless and alone. That night, I called Diana. We'd stayed in touch, and she'd become a real friend. "Thank you," I told her, "for believing me when no one else would, for helping me fight back, for giving me hope." "You did the hard part," she said. "I just amplified your voice. You're the one who had the courage to stand up. I almost gave up, but you didn't. That's what matters." Looking back now, I can see my life in clear chapters. The before, when I was trapped in a toxic family system, being used and manipulated and gaslit into thinking I was the problem. The during, when everything fell apart and I had to fight for my truth against overwhelming odds. And the after, now, when I'm finally free to be myself. The lessons I learned are ones I'll carry forever. First, your worth isn't determined by how your family treats you. If the people who raised you can't see your value, that's their failure, not yours. You deserve love and respect, regardless of whether your parents are capable of providing it. Second, truth really does come to light eventually. It might take time. It might require patience and strategic action. But lies eventually collapse under their own weight. The truth is powerful because it's real, and reality always wins in the end. Third, fighting for justice is worth it even when the cost is high. There were moments when continuing the fight meant losing everything, but giving up would have meant losing myself. I chose truth over belonging, and that choice saved me. Fourth, sometimes you have to walk away from everyone you've ever known to become who you're meant to be. Leaving my family was terrifying and painful, but staying would have been worse. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself. And finally, integrity is more valuable than approval. I could have stayed silent, accepted their abuse, been welcomed back into the family if I'd just gone along with their corruption. But I would have had to betray myself to do it. I chose to keep my integrity even though it meant losing them. And now, standing here with my self-respect intact, I know I made the right choice. To anyone listening who's facing something similar, whether it's family betrayal, workplace corruption, or any situation where you're being told to accept injustice to keep the peace, I want you to know this. You are not crazy. You are not the problem. And you don't have to accept abuse just because it comes from people who are supposed to love you. Speaking your truth might cost you relationships. It might cost you money or opportunities or comfort. But living with lies costs you your soul. Choose yourself. Choose truth. Choose integrity. The people who truly love you will still be there. The ones who disappear were never really on your side anyway. And you'll find new people, better people, who value you for who you really are. My family tried to erase me. They failed. Instead, they erased themselves. And I'm still here, thriving, free, and finally at peace. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and telling the truth? Have you ever been in a situation where standing up for yourself meant losing people you thought you couldn't live without? What would you do if your own family tried to destroy you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about resilience, justice, and overcoming betrayal. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their struggles. And remember, your truth matters, your integrity matters, and you matter. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I hope it gives you strength if you're facing your own battles. May you always have the courage to choose yourself, and may you find the peace that comes from living in truth. You're stronger than you know, and you deserve better than people who try to erase you. Take care of yourself out there. You're worth it.